Hello, everybody. Welcome into the NBA Front Office Show. Lots to talk about on today's show. We're going to get into expansion. We've got an update on that. Is that actually coming to the NBA? We'll get into that. We need to talk a bit about the Kings, taking a look at a veteran player, maybe an addition on the wing. There's some new rules coming to the NBA that we need to get into. Plus, we're going to take a look at the Pacific Division. One big question from both teams, or from every team in the Pacific Division. We'll break all of that down. And I'm sure we'll probably get into some nonsense too. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel here on the NBA Front Office Show. Keith, you've been undergoing some, I don't know if I want to call it home renovation. You're getting a roof put in, and so you've been dealing with that. So at some point, it may sound like Santa Claus is arriving early, but we'll know that it's just the roof coming in, and we'll work through it.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, we the bulk of it is done. That's why we didn't record Monday, recorded so late yesterday. But they've got a couple. I'm by no means a roofer. I've done a lot of construction stuff. I've done a lot of landscaping work, but I've never done roofing, mostly because I'm terrified of heights. I don't know if I've ever talked about that, but I am no part of it. Like, you put me more than about 3-4 steps up on a ladder and I start getting shaky. So I definitely don't want to be on a roof, but yeah, there's apparently just stuff they got to clean up. So they literally just pulled in to start doing a little bit of that. So we hear a little bit of banging and knocking. That's probably what it is.
All right. Well, we'll have to we'll work through it, but a lot of stuff for us to get into.
Yeah.
In fact, something the NBA needs to work through here. It's the expansion situation. So a lot of people are always interested in expansion. I think just because it's such a fun topic, but they're not ready to make anything official at this point. It feels like it's the worst kept secret. Like, we all know this is coming. But every time they get a chance to confirm it or say, oh yeah, we're discussing it and this is happening or anything like that, it's, well, we still need to have these conversations. And look, there's a lot of moving parts in order to get expansion going. A lot of things have to happen, but I still believe it's coming. Just interesting that Adam Silver said, well, we're going to have that discussion down the road.
Yeah, basically so where all this came out of, it was the NBA's Board of Governor meeting was yesterday. We're going to get into another thing that they voted on and approved moving forward. So we'll get into that in a minute. But yeah, Adam Silver gave not quite the full state of the NBA update like he does usually around the All-Star break and the NBA Finals. But he gave a little bit of an update on, hey, here's some of the stuff. I think it's a good bet. Anytime he's in front of a member of the media now, if they're basketball media, he's going to be asked about expansion. And I think he knows it too, right? He opened that door himself when he finally said last time around, yeah, we're going to expand. We're going to get into it. So what he said yesterday was not a lot of discussion on expansion, but only not for lack of interest. It was that we said we're not quite ready. It was something we told our board we plan to address this season, and we're not quite ready. There's certainly interest in the process. We're just not yet there about markets or even, frankly, to expand. Then he said, I know I've said this before. And then he goes into a whole bunch of stuff that's all repeat comments that he's made about we want to really make sure we have healthy franchises and all that stuff. And he said, what we've told interested parties is thank you for your interest. We'll get back to you. And that's certainly the case in Seattle as well. So he called out Seattle specifically in one of those quotes. So, and I don't know if unfortunately, where I'm reading this from does not have what the actual question was. So I don't know if he was asked about Seattle directly. I think he may have been, because he was asked directly about climate. What is it? Climate Pledge Arena, I think is now what it's called. The former Key Arena in Seattle where the Sonics used to play. He was asked specifically about the renovations that have happened there. So yeah, so he got kind of into that. So I think that was probably where that answer came from, was related to that. But clearly it's coming. It's just going to be a little while longer. And then to be fair to Adam Silver, he always said it would be in the fall, and I don't know when fall actually starts for real, but I know we're at least a couple weeks out from it, probably even more than that. So we're not there yet, but it's definitely coming.
Isn't it officially September 22nd or something?
I don't know. I
want to say, I know there it is. September 22nd, according to the Google machine, tells me September 22nd is the autumn equinox. Though I think a lot of people kind of just treat anything post Labor Day is pumpkin
Yeah.
spice everything,
Yep.
and so
100%.
that's fall. But I don't know, like I don't want to go down the whole fall path because I'll tell you what, I'm excited. I'm excited for the weather cooling down and all that kind
Oh
of
man, I
stuff, and
can't wait.
sweatshirts and
Yes.
jackets, and let's go. I'm ready for it. But as far as expansion goes, I do think that it's coming. I do think it's going to be Seattle and Vegas, but I think the NBA, they just don't want to rush anything. That even though
Yep.
we all know it's coming. We all know it's going to be Seattle and Vegas. We all know what direction this is going. With the big question being who moves east. But that they got to be careful. They got to make sure that they time everything just right. They have to make sure they have all their ducks in a row, because what they don't want to do, and this is why you brought up that he specifically mentioned Seattle. What they don't want to do is tip their hand on, number one, is expansion officially a go, and number two, where it's officially going, and then have something fall through, have something not be set. If you say, oh, we're expanding and Seattle is looking really good, and then something falls through in Seattle, you got a problem on your hands. You've got issue. You've got people who are going to be upset. You'd rather manage those expectations, not make anything official until you have everything all lined up. That's just not where the league is at right now.
Yeah, absolutely. You also you want this to be a bidding war between these interested parties and cities, because what you don't want to do is say it's Seattle and Las Vegas and like, cool, here's $25 for each franchise, right? We want in. That's all we're willing to pay. And obviously they would say no. But what they really want to have is they want it to be, hey, we thought 4 billion would be enough. Well, you know what? Montreal is willing to give us 5. So are you willing to match that if you're Seattle or Las Vegas, and kind of go from there? So that's going to be where it gets really kind of interesting to see how this ultimately comes together with this. But yeah, but you're right. You don't want anything to fall through. You want to drive a bidding war with this. You want to try to do this, because the real thing is with expansion, they may expand beyond that, but you can only do it once in those markets. In theory, right. I know Charlotte kind of did it twice, but in theory, you can only kind of do it once. So you really want to make sure it is all right. Let's maximize what that is, because once they're in the league, now they're in the league. They are going to start sharing in the profits like everybody else does. That's that initial buy-in to get a franchise. You want to maximize that as much as possible, and the best way to do that is have 5, 6, 7, 10 cities, whatever it is, bidding for teams. And I think we're going to get pretty close.
What are the other? I mean, we've heard Mexico City. What are the other cities that could get involved?
Yeah, they're all in North America. There's a topic we could talk about with Europe if we want to spend any time on it, but it's the two primary: Seattle, Las Vegas. Louisville has been very interested. They've pushed very hard. They really want a team. We hear Kansas City and St. Louis, which is, if you're watching the show, Trevor, is a map up of the United States, and it's got all of the NBA cities on it. And right smack in the middle, St. Louis isn't on it, but you kind of, if you know where St. Louis is, you can kind of find it pretty easy on the border of Missouri. But if Kansas City is there, there's no team there, right? It's just a big kind of empty hole in the middle of the country. But they have not been prominently mentioned, either city, during this round. It's primarily been Seattle, Las Vegas, Louisville, Montreal, Vancouver, and Mexico City. Yeah. Those have been kind of the 6 cities that have been most prominently mentioned with that. Virginia Beach gets thrown in there every once in a while with that. There's kind of a decent gap in between the Wizards and the Hornets in the East. So, yeah, I'm very curious to see, which direction they kind of go with these teams and where they come from. But I love this map because it does give you a real kind of understanding of, like, Portland just kind of hangs out by themselves in the Northwest. And then Minnesota is a Western Conference team that is nowhere near another Western Conference team.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. When we talk about New Orleans, we talk about Memphis. You can see they're clustered right there by OKC, by Dallas, by San Antonio, by Houston. They've at least got other teams by them. There's nobody. Minnesota's just up there kind of all by themselves. It is. I mean, when you look at the map, it looks strange that Minnesota is a Western Conference team, but I mean, it's just kind of the way things are laid out here. Technically, I guess Memphis is the easternmost team, but I would
Yeah.
have to imagine it's gotta be Minnesota just to cut down.
Yeah,
Like
just
if you're a Western Conference team that's not named Memphis or New Orleans, you've got to be rooting for Minnesota to be the team that goes east, just because it cuts down a decently long trip. It gets rid of that. Whereas you can go, if you're Golden State and you're going to New Orleans, that's a long trip, but you can go hit Memphis and OKC, Dallas. You can go hit those other teams while you're over there. You go
yeah.
to Minnesota, you're going to Minnesota. That's it. There's nothing else around it unless you want to start to tag into an Eastern Conference portion of your schedule.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah. And I think too, one of the things that we see in this, you can start to get the sense of, all right, if they go to 2 team conferences, you can start to really see, well, this is kind of how you could get to 2 8 team divisions, to four four 8 4 team divisions if they went out there. I guess it'd be 4 team divisions in each conference. You could start to get ways. I've seen this same map with like people have drawn like lines around it to be like, this is where people, you group these 4 together and these 4 and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, there's definitely ways we can absolutely get there. So my guess is whenever it is time, and it is time for the 2 teams, and I'm going to continue to assume it'll be Seattle and Las Vegas. We're going to see some really, they'll use that as the opportunity to really restructure the idea of what do our traditional conferences, divisions, and scheduling practices look like. Like what can we do a little bit differently around all this?
All right. Well, we'll of course keep everybody updated as we hear more about expansion. We do think it's coming. It's just a matter of time before we get there. And then when it does happen, we're going to be able to break down all of the things, all the expansion draft and how that works and all the intricacies of it, and maybe teams trying to encourage the expansion teams to take certain players off their roster and all kinds of fun different things that we can get into once expansion happens. But let's go here. Sacramento working out Jae Crowder. What are your thoughts on this? It wasn't that long ago didn't the Bucks pay, what was it, 4 or 5 second round picks, something like that, to get Jae Crowder. Now here he is working out for the Kings, looking for a spot on their roster. Do the Kings need that wing depth behind DeMar DeRozan and Keegan Murray?
A lot of it, I think, depends on, so where are you at with, does Kevin Huerter start? If Kevin Huerter's coming off the bench, well, now you kind of have your 2-3 wing there. And then a lot of it comes down to, what do you think of Jalen McDaniels? If you believe Jalen McDaniels can look like the guy he looked like in Charlotte a couple years ago, when it was like, all right, this guy's starting to come along a little bit, looks like he might be a player, then you could probably say they don't need him. If you're like, yeah, no, when I look at it, when their roster just kind of screams out to me that they need one more forward with some size. And I think that's where Jae Crowder could help them. He really, at this point, he's no longer really a wing. He's much more of a combo forward because he just can't really guard the quicker, smaller 2 guards anymore, but he can guard most 3s and really any 4. He can hold up. So that's where I kind of think, yeah, put Jae Crowder in this group, fine. And he should be at the point in his career where, one, you're going to get him on a minimum. If you don't play him very much, you don't play him very much. He's just there kind of as a, break glass in case of emergency at the end of your bench.
Hey, I think it's a good point on Jalen McDaniels. He was involved in that Davion Mitchell trade. We'll see if he ends up being a guy for them on the wing, and if not, to have a better. You can never have too much wing help in the NBA. A lot of teams are looking for that guy that can defend multiple positions, and I don't know if that's Jae Crowder at this point. He's certainly not at one point he could kind of defend 2 through 4 and give you some things, but I don't know if that's really him at this stage. But the more guys like that you can get, particularly with this Sacramento team being so strong offensively, but maybe having some defensive questions, if you can get another wing that at least has the history of playing good defense, even if he's not quite what he used to be, he still could be an interesting addition. Like you said, if it's not working out, it's not working out, and he is a veteran minimum signing, so be it, right? If it doesn't work, it's worth a try if you can bring him in and he looks good, and you can add him to this team, because the Kings, obviously they want to make the playoffs. They want to go on a run here. they don't want to just kind of be an okay team. They've gone all in on the offensive end. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't still try to do what they can to help themselves out on the defensive side of the ball. And that's why giving Jae Crowder a look, I know he's a veteran. I know they already have a 35-year-old DeMar DeRozan, but there's not a whole lot of wings out there who can defend just sitting on the market. Those guys get scooped up real fast. So to me, it makes sense for them to give this a try. I don't have high expectations for it, but on a minimum signing, whatever, it's a minimum.
Yep. Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at. And I'm fine with it. If that's the direction they go, I think it's fine. I think they could use maybe one more big. I still kind of like Orlando Robinson. He's there on a partially guaranteed contract. I do like Trey Lyles. I think Alex Len's done a fine job. And the reality is Sabonis plays so much anyway. He rarely comes off the floor. So you don't really need a major big minute guy behind him. So they're probably fine. So yeah, another wing, especially if it's a wing with a little bit of size. Yeah, let's go for it. Because I think with the combination of DeRozan and Malik Monk as your two primary guys there, then you've got Kevin Huerter and Keon Ellis, who I really still like quite a bit. I think Keon Ellis is a sneaky guy to start for the Kings. I don't want to step too much on something we're going to talk about later in the show there, but it is whereas with him, I think they've got pretty good depth already. So get one more guy who can play a little bit bigger, you're good to go. I'm at the point now where I'm excited to watch everybody. Like I can't wait to see how all these teams, but like the Kings they are like endlessly fascinating to me just because it's just such a funky roster. Like I can't wait to watch it all come together.
I can't wait. Like the Nets, let's go. I can't wait to see them. Whoever, the teams that are tanking. I can't wait to see all those teams too. Yeah, that's the point that we're at right now. We're starving for NBA basketball, but I think it's a good question. Keon Ellis, and again, we'll get into this in just a bit. We do our Pacific Division big question for each team, but Keon Ellis versus Kevin Huerter. How would you handicap that? Like, what percentage chance do you think it is that Keon Ellis is the starter versus Kevin Huerter?
I think it's pretty close to 50-50
right?
For me. Let's save it because I want to talk about that when we get into the big question, because that is my big question for the Kings.
Okay, perfect. So we'll talk about that more in just a moment. So Kings fans, stick around. Actually,
teaser. That's what they call it in the business.
Not just Kings fans. Everybody.
Yeah, everybody. Yes.
Stick around. Stick around. Like this over on YouTube while you're at it.
Yep.
While you're at it, just go ahead and like this. All right, let's talk about the expanded replay rules. Keith, I think last season, by the midway point, I was so frustrated with the replay system that I said, that's it. Just throw the whole thing out. Just get rid of it. I'm done with it. But it seems like the Board of Governors has voted to essentially allow referees to, on a call that's being reviewed for the ball going out of bounds, they are now allowed to look and see if there was a foul on the play, which we would see happen fairly often, where a player would get fouled. As a result of the foul, the ball would go out of bounds. The referees wouldn't be able to tell who it went out off of. They would go to review it, or the call would be challenged and they would go and look at it, but they couldn't rule on whether or not there was a foul. They just had to rule on who touched the ball last. To me, it was just a bad look for the NBA, because everybody could clearly, and people at home could all clearly see it. And it just made people even more frustrated with the officials that here there was something obvious that was clear. Hey, they missed a foul call. It's right there. And they don't adjust for that. They're just calling based on who touched the ball last. So I think this is a good change. I hope it doesn't lengthen the review situation, because it shouldn't. It should. A lot of these are pretty obvious. You go, oh, okay, clearly the guy got fouled. Hopefully it actually shortens things, but it's a tweak to the replay system here. I think it's needed if the replay system is going to survive.
Agreed. And I'm with you, because hopefully what they look at is, oh, there's a foul. We're just going to change it to a foul call versus, all right, let's zoom in to the, micron here, and half a fingernail touched it last, and that's how it went out of bounds after. He punched the dude in the face to cause it to go out of bounds in the first place, but we can't look at that. Sorry, that's not
why did I just think of Draymond when I pictured that scene in my head?
Right? Yeah, possibly. yeah, you and probably 99% of the
Everybody
rest
else.
of the basketball watching world. But yeah, it does like get to a point where it's like, yeah, if we're gonna have replay, let's I don't by no means am I saying let's review everything because
No.
there's already too much. But yeah, and my big thing is I wish one of the things they put in was let's put a timer on this
Yeah.
minute, whatever it is, I don't care, but that's it. Because these, especially in the playoff games, and I get it, they're trying to get the call right, but it's like, come on, guys, if we're looking at it from the 15th angle and we are so like zoomed in on it and you still don't know, then call on the floor stands and we just move on. And if it turns out it's a bad call, it's a bad call. And how many of these two they come to an agreement and then people still don't believe, they're still like that's still the wrong call, like
Yeah.
I can tell because it's part of it is as fans we all watch with wanting it to go our way, and it's like, was he on the line, was he not, who touched it last, all those kind of things. So yeah, hopefully this cleans it up, can just now say, oh, that's actually a foul, and then we go. But if this turns into, all right, now we get was it a foul or not? Let's debate that for 2-3 minutes.
Right.
Then let's move into 2-3 minutes of who it was off of. That's just too much. It's nobody wants that. Just keep the game moving.
Yeah, I think what it does, as long as you said, they keep the game moving, this doesn't slow things down too much. I think what it does is it takes away another way for fans to look at this and have questions about the officials, because that's not what the NBA wants. Given the past, given what's gone on, all the Tim Donaghy stuff and
Yep.
all of that, you don't want
Sure.
fans looking at a play and saying that guy got like clearly that guy got fouled. The fix is in. Hashtag rigged, right? All that kind of, you
Yeah.
don't want all of that kind of stuff. If you're the NBA, you want things to look like it's on the up and up. You want things to be when a fan can see something at home that is obvious. And again, fans, we're going to root with our hearts, and all of that. All of that's going to happen, right? So you're always going to have some semblance of that. But I'm talking about stuff that obviously a guy gets hit across the arms or something, and then referees have to ignore it. It just leads to more distrust
Yep.
from fans
Yep.
of the officials, and that's not a good thing for the league. I also
Yeah.
say this, Keith, I would take it out of the hands of the officials on the floor. And so kind of like in soccer, right? Where now I know the referee can go over to the sideline and actually
Sure.
look at a play but a lot of times they're just, they go to their ear and they're getting the replay from the guy right there. Because I think what's happening some of the times is it is going to the replay review system, right? It's going to New Jersey and they're looking at it, and then fans are reacting to the call when it's not the refs that are on the floor making it. I think it would be easier if it was just a blanket across the board. This is reviewed remotely. The decision gets sent back to the officials. It's not on them.
Yep.
It's not their fault, and that'll avoid, because we get to a point where fans start to know referees and start picking out, oh, this
Oh,
referee did this to my team
yeah.
last time. When a lot of
Yeah.
times when we go to these reviews, it's not even that referee. And I think if they just made it blanket across the board, the review is done in New Jersey, that takes some of the heat, I think, off of those refs.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you could have that. I think they did a nice change with making it like they're reviewing the 3-pointers and should baskets count or not remotely. What they need to be better about that is then there needs to be some way they alert the broadcast team that this happened and the score changed. Because there's times when we'll be playing and then you look up and you're like, I thought they had 93 points. Why do they only have 92 points or 90 points? And then
Right.
you find out later, like, oh, they took that basket off. And it's like 5 minutes later that somebody alerts the broadcast team, oh, that basket, 10 minutes ago was actually reviewed and found to come after the shot clock and those kind of things. But, hey, if we're trying to get it right and we're trying to improve, go. Just nobody wants, I don't want less basketball. I just don't want games taking 3 hours because
Yeah.
30 minutes every night is spent sitting while dudes look at a courtside monitor. Like nobody
Right.
wants that. It kills the games too. It kills crowds. It like just kills the flow of the game. Like just let's keep things going.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. Let's get into our one big question for each Pacific Division team. We'll take a look at, here's the grouping. This is the standings from last year, how the division broke down. I guess let
Nuts that first to fifth was 5 games.
right in the division.
Crazy.
I mean,
All
as the West,
postseason
it's
teams.
crazy. I would imagine, given that the Clippers lost Paul George, and I think they rebounded actually pretty nicely from losing Paul George, but I still think they take a bit of a step back. Like I would assume, Keith, that the Pacific Division will not finish in this order. However, the crazy thing is, you could flip this around in any way that you want and make an argument for why it's going to finish that way.
Yep. 100%. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. If you told me it was going to be Lakers, Warriors, Kings, Suns, Clippers, sure. Okay.
Yeah.
I have no idea because I haven't looked. I don't know who has the highest over under. I would guess it's probably Phoenix in the division. Just, what would be my guess. So they probably have the best odds to win the division as well. I think they should be the best team in the division, but that doesn't mean, necessarily a whole heck of a lot here. So yeah. But yeah. All right. Want to
Let's see. I'm just pulling the
you're
odds.
pulling
Yeah, I
it
think
up.
Phoenix does have
Okay.
number one. Okay. Let's just start at the top. Let's start with the Clippers because I think they're an interesting team to start with, and I'll work our way down from last season's standings. Again, I wouldn't project the Clippers to be the top team in this. In fact, I would probably say they're most likely to be the bottom team in this, but again, it's not impossible. Anybody can come out on top in this, and I do think they rebounded nicely from the Paul George situation. So I think my biggest question for the Clippers as they head to their new home at the Intuit Dome, maybe it's a cop out because this is the question with them every year. It's, can Kawhi stay healthy? They dealt with that last year. They dealt with Kawhi Leonard being injured, and that obviously was a big part of their season coming to an end, and that's kind of the way that it's gone for the Clippers over the years now. So can Kawhi Leonard stay healthy? Because there's even more pressure on him to be the guy, be that MVP level of Kawhi Leonard. Now that Paul George is on his way out, I know they've got other pieces. You've got James Harden in town. You've got other guys who can do stuff. But still, ultimately, I think this Clippers team goes as far as Kawhi Leonard's going to take them.
Yeah, and that's definitely one of the big ones. I'm just to be different. My question is going to be, do they have enough size? It's kind of a Ivica Zubac and then a bunch of dudes kind of cosplaying as power forwards on this roster. Derek Jones Jr. played mostly, at the 3 and the 4 in his career, but he's a much smaller 4. He's a very slight kind of guy. Nick Batum at this point is probably a 4, but Nick Batum is also probably a 15-minute a night guy in the regular season, especially if you're hoping to have him in the playoffs. And then it's Mo Bamba is the only big behind Ivica Zubac on the roster. They don't really have any young bigs in the pipeline or anything like that. So that's my big thing is, do you have enough size on this roster to kind of contend with the other teams in the West? Now in the division, you're probably okay, right? Nobody in this division plays with 2 bigs, right? Everybody pretty much plays a 1 big system. But when you get into like Denver, you're going to have enough size for Jokic and Gordon in the way, especially the Nuggets. They love to send guys, to the offensive glass. What happens when you get to OKC if they're running both Holmgren and Hartenstein together? Minnesota, obviously, with their 2 bigs. Even Houston and Dallas play bigger at times with sometimes like a real
Lively
power forward
Gafford
alongside a center. Yeah. So like are you going to have enough size to get to where you want to be? Because all accounts are they're still planning on being a playoff team. You don't re-sign Kawhi, go out and re-sign Harden, go out and add some veterans if you're like, we're really resetting things and taking a step back. They're trying to be a playoff team. So, that's my big one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point on the Clippers. All right, let's jump over to the. Oh, by the way, last season I did want to mention. Last season the Clippers had Mason Plumlee and Daniel Tice behind Zubac, which is I mean those are 2 quality NBA backups.
Yep.
And now this year they've got Mo Bamba, who is I know Keith, you're a big Mo Bamba fan.
Yeah.
But So there is, I think it's a good point by you that there is that lack of depth there right now with the Clippers. All right, the Phoenix Suns. Keith, I did the Clippers first. Why don't you kick off the Suns?
Yeah, so with the Suns, it's did they did the rebalancing of the roster and adding point guards push them into a place where they are better, more stable? Or does it take guys out of the rhythm, like a guy like Grayson Allen, who started every game and had the best year of his career? What does that look like with him probably transitioning to a bench role now? Like, is it how is that going to work out? Are there enough minutes for guys like Royce O'Neal and those kind of things? So it's just they rebalanced with Tyus Jones and then Monte Morris coming in. So you're really in a nice spot there, I think, with those two guys. But what does it look like with kind of going back to a bit more of a traditional kind of backcourt than what you ran last season?
I think that's a great point. The Suns, they didn't really have point guards last season. Point Devin Booker was a thing. Point Booker was a thing, and now they've got actual point guards. And you got a pretty good one in Tyus Jones. Monte Morris is quality as well. But and then that size, Mason Plumlee left the Clippers for the Suns, so they've got a little bit of depth at the big position as well. So I think the Suns did some good things, especially given their limitations this summer. My big question is, and again, I hate to just lean on stars so much, but it's what is Bradley Beal? Because if you get a Bradley Beal that is, I don't think he's going to be, the guy that was scoring 30 points a night a few seasons ago. I don't think you're going to get that. But if you can get a Bradley Beal that can be efficient, that can be another ball handler in your offense, and most importantly, can be there, that makes a big difference for the Suns team. But you look at Bradley Beal, the last 5 seasons, this is how many games he's played in each of the last 5 seasons: 53 games, 50 games, 40 games, 60 games, 57 games. The 2 seasons before that, he played every game. 2 straight 82-game seasons before that. But the last 5 years, his highest games played in a season was 60, and that was 4 years ago. Last time he was an all-star. So a lot, I think, will depend on what do they get from Bradley Beal and can he stay on the court. I think that's going to be a really, really important factor for the Suns team, because that's going to raise their ceiling so much if they can have Beal, Booker, and Durant play more games together this season.
I agree with you. And I hand up right here, I had them all the way. I thought they were going to beat the Timberwolves in the first round, and they got swept. Like, I stayed a believer in this team just because I was like, the talent's going to win out. They've made it this far. They won 49 games. They've played well enough with this group, and I was like, yeah, they're going to be they're going to get there when they need to, and then just wasn't good enough. So yeah, I'm very curious to see. And I would say too, this is probably the last. I know it. This is only year 2 of it, but I think they're only getting 2 years. If it doesn't work, and by work I mean like maybe they lose a really competitive second round series, which in the West, that's not a bad season for a lot of teams because the West is so deep. Then they can probably say, okay, this worked, like a couple tweaks and we'll be right there. But if they're like out easy in the first round or worse, like they don't even get there, you're not going to see this team brought back in this same fashion. I don't know that KD will even want to be there, right? He's not a guy who over the last several years has had a whole lot of patience with stuff not going ways he wants it to go. So I think we're a little bit on the clock for this iteration of the Suns.
I think that's a fair point. Now, I just looked it up, and KD, again, 35. KD was pretty healthy last season, too, in terms of games played. But I just looked it up. The Suns had a total of 7,834 possessions they played last season. And they had Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant on the floor together for just 1,700 of those over the course of the season. That's just not enough reps for those 3 together. So that's something that we'll certainly be looking to climb. All right, let's jump over to my Lakers. I think for me, the big question, and I know I've talked about health on the last 2 on the Clippers and the Suns, so I'm not going to go lean back on that again. Obviously, it'll be a big factor for them. But the question for the Lakers, it's if and when they make a trade. I mean, I think we all saw last season that this team is good, but not quite good enough. They're good enough to put up a fight most nights. They're good enough to probably make the playoffs or the play in the Western Conference. But are they good enough to really capitalize on LeBron and AD's talents? No, they're simply not. So the question for the Lakers will be between now and the trade deadline, are they making a move? And if so, what is that move? Is there a move out there that can put them over the top? Are they willing to sacrifice that future draft capital? Brian Windhorst recently questioned that, saying they're a developmental team. We talked about that a little bit, Keith, you and I did. But that's the big question. It's when is a move coming? It's kind of similar to a few years ago, to a lesser degree, when the Lakers had Russell Westbrook and everybody knew that they were trying to trade him. Everybody knew they were probably going to trade him at some point. Just the question was, where and when were they going to ultimately execute that trade? We thought they might do it before the season started. Instead, they did it closer to the trade deadline when that D'Angelo Russell trade. Kind of feels the same here, where everybody knows they need to do something, but that something has still yet to materialize.
Yeah, I would be lying if I said it was anything but that for me. But just again, for the sake of being a little bit different, I'll go with the roster as is. And my question is, who can step up and be consistently because these are like hand in hand for me, the third and fourth guys, because LeBron and AD are 1A, 1B. It's who will be the third and fourth guys. And when I say consistently, it is can somebody step forward and I'm getting this out of them every night. It is not, hey, I averaged 20 points because tonight I scored 35 and tomorrow I scored 5. Like it is who can give them consistent production night over night over night. And the second is, do they have enough depth? Do they have enough depth to get through the regular season knowing LeBron and AD were mostly healthy last year, and it's probably not a great bet that that's going to continue for another season. So if they miss time, what is that going to look like? What does that depth look like? And as we've talked about in the last couple of shows, that's already taken a major hit with Jared Vanderbilt and Christian Wood being out. So they're going to need guys like Dalton Connect and Cam Reddish and obviously Jackson Hayes and Rui Hachimura. Those guys are going to have to be big. But so that it's kind of all tied hand in hand there. Is do they have enough besides LeBron and AD to get through? Because are those guys going to continue to be like all NBA level guys? Like it maybe they may be. And as we've seen, it may still not be enough. So who knows what that's going to look like.
Yeah, that's a fair point. They need LeBron and AD to be on the floor. The Lakers were an extremely injured team last season. It just wasn't injuries to LeBron James and Anthony Davis. It was injuries to just about Austin Reeves was also pretty healthy, but it was injuries to just about everybody else that really kind of set them back there. So it's a fair point. We'll see ultimately what the Lakers look like. Do they indeed have that depth? I think it puts a lot of pressure on Dalton Connect to step in and do something right away, even more so with Christian Wood now out. Jared Vanderbilt, we'll see what happens with him, but it does put pressure on Connect. All right, let's jump over to the Sacramento Kings. And Keith, I'm so excited for the Kings offense. My big question is their defense. Can they play defense at a passable level? And I'll tell you what, I was actually shocked when I was doing some digging on the Kings. They were actually ranked 14th in defensive rating last year in the NBA, and then their offensive rating was 13th. So they were kind of slightly better than middle of the pack in both categories. I expected top 10 offensively, bottom 20 defensively, and that's kind of how this roster is constructed because it tends to be how we see the Kings. But I still think, despite the way that finished up last season, they are very much an offensive-focused team. So does the addition of DeMar DeRozan make them indeed a solid top 10 offense, maybe better? And then can their defense be good enough? Because if you're a top 10 offense but a bottom 20 defense, you're not going anywhere. If you reverse that, you're not going anywhere. You need to be really good at least on one side of the ball, and I think they can be really good offensively. And then at the very least, you have to be good, passable on the other side. And so that's going to be the question. Can they be good enough defensively for what I think was an offensive ceiling raise that we saw over the summer to really matter for them?
Yeah, and I said this in a previous episode. I was completely wrong, much like you said you looked, and I was like, man, they were 14th in defense. Like I didn't realize it was that good. Now, where they how did the Kings get there, right? That starts to become a little bit of like, well, how did they get there? Well, they're pretty good at forcing turnovers, and they were the best defensive rebounding team in the league. A lot of that, Domantas Sabonis, for my money right now, is probably the best defensive rebounder in the NBA. You could still argue there's probably a couple other guys, but he's there every night, plays, does his thing. So when I get there with the Kings, I start to look at it and say, all right, yeah, here we go. Like maybe they can. Maybe that is repeatable because there's no reason the rebounding should be worse. And if they can still force some turnovers, yeah, they're not going to block a lot of shots. They're probably not going to hold teams to a great defensive field goal percentage, but forcing turnovers. And when you do force misses, making sure you clean up the glass, that's huge. My big question, again, semi-related to yours about the defense is who starts alongside the four guys we can pretty much put in pen? Sabonis, Fox, DeRozan, and Murray. Who's going to be the fifth starter? There's been some buzz. Maybe it could be Malik Monk who re-signed there. I tend to think Malik Monk, like he's found his calling now, which is high-end 6-man of the year type 6-man, still going to play 30 minutes a night and be great off the bench. That's where he should be. So that for me really brings it down to, is it Kevin Huerter or is it Keon Ellis? And when we were talking earlier in the show, said, let me hold it because I'm kind of 50-50 between the two of them. I can see the case for Huerter if he's making his shots because the offensive starting group could use another shooter. But I can also see the case for Ellis, who started a lot last year and was really, really part of that defense, that ball hawking, forcing turnovers. He's got really good size, so he helps cover for guys if they go into switches and stuff. I kind of think, I think Mike Brown, historically being a defensive coach, may lean towards, you know what, I'm just going to run with Keon Ellis for now. And then if the shooting problems get to be too big of an issue, I can turn to Huerter. Or if it's a really major issue, I can turn to Monk if I really need to, and that's what I can do.
Yeah, they've got options there, and so it'll be interesting to see exactly how he deploys that whole rotation of guards. But Keith, I'm really excited about Sacramento because I think they can get there defensively. It's not going to be easy, but I think they can get there, and I think their offense can be really, really special. So this is, again, we're at that point where we're excited to watch everybody, but this is one of the teams that's up there on my list. I can't wait to see Sacramento in action.
Let me tell you this.
Yeah.
As an East Coast guy, nothing was worse those handful of years when it was like the Warriors and then 4 crappy West Coast teams. 5 really, because we'll throw Portland in that mix too. Portland was always kind of okay during those years, but it was like, oh man, like it finished all the games and now I want to watch one more. Oh, cool. It's the Kings and the Clippers, or it's the rebuilding Lakers and the Trailblazers. Yay, this is fun. Like now I'm like, man, bring it on. Like all 5 of these teams, I have a blast watching them. I'll have a blast watching the Trailblazers too, because like at least early in the year, when we're kind of figuring some stuff out about them. We're definitely going to hit a point with the Trailblazers. I'm like, bye-bye Trailblazers. You're out of the viewing rotation on any kind of regular basis. But yeah, these 5 teams, they're all good. They're all fun. Like it's going to be really fun to watch them.
All right, let's jump over to the Warriors. I think I started on this last one. So why don't you start to finish off the division here?
Yeah, I'm going to kind of keep this one. We're going to know here pretty soon, within a couple months. What do they do with extensions for Kuminga and Moody? Yes. That's not necessarily an on-court thing, but it will spill over to on-court. More so Kuminga. I think Moody is definitely in a spot where we've got Brandon Podziemski. We kind of replaced you. We got Buddy Hield. I like Moses Moody, but I don't know if they're going to come to any kind of agreement. So it really is what happens with Jonathan Kuminga. Do they extend him? What does it look like? I think Jonathan Kuminga is looking around and saying, hey, Franz Wagner, Evan Mobley, they got, major contracts. I'm just as good. Give me a max deal too. And I think the Warriors are probably like, we just kind of dug out of a couple not great contracts. Mm-hmm. I don't know that we want to lock into another max contract, but this has the potential to get a little bit messy. Maybe it's just, hey, we're going to let it play out. We can always match any offer you get as a restricted free agent, but he is the last best thing they have of the whole 2 timelines era for that second timeline. Wiseman's long gone. It's Jonathan Kuminga. Well, what has he become? And if people weren't watching last year, he was terrific last season. Basically improved in every facet of the game, not just stats wise, but like his defense was better, his on-ball defense, his off-ball defense, his pull-up jump shots, his standstill jump shots. Everything was just better. And I think we're seeing this guy's blossoming into. If I'm the Warriors, I be careful here, because this may be your next guy, and you just don't want this to go sideways on you.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. That was certainly one of the things that I wanted to bring up about the Warriors as well. When I look at the Warriors, I mean, maybe even more so than my Lakers, I look at the Warriors and I think, when's the trade coming? Because you look at the pieces that are on this roster. You've got Steph Curry. You've got Andrew Wiggins. Is he a guy that you want to keep long term? I don't know. That's a decision they'll have to make. But you look at the amount of expirings they've got, of movable expirings. Kevon Looney, he's got one. You've got eventually DeAnthony Melton, post December 15th. I think he's going to be, I'm a big fan of DeAnthony Melton. I think he's going to be a great fit if he can stay healthy. But Gary Payton II is another contract that you could put in. And we know, the ownership, Joe Lacob, is on the record saying we don't want to be an average team. We don't want to be just a team in the West. We want to be a really good team. So I think there's motivation here. They've committed long-term to Steph Curry, as long-term as they possibly can. They've got this 3-year window. I think this is a roster that's very much primed for a trade, and it's going to be interesting to see what the Warriors do. We know they were already kicking the tires on Lauri Markkanen, looking at him. There were some discussions with Paul George as well, trying to make something happen there. So I think this is a team that's going to continue to stay aggressive. So for me, the big question is, when is the move coming? Maybe I'm cheating a little bit, because I do have another little minor thing that I want to get into. The Warriors have planted their flag with Brandon Podziemski. They kept him out of trade talks with Paul George, out of trade, or a sign and trade with Paul George, kept him out of trade talks with Lauri Markkanen, and said, no, he's off limits. They believe he's going to be very, very good this year, that he's going to take another step forward. That's going to be a key thing to watch. Does Brandon Podziemski reward that faith that the Warriors have had in him and the emphasis they've placed on him? That's going to be another big, big question, I think, for the Warriors this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, spot on with all that. I mean, it's kind of that trio of Kuminga, Podziemski, and maybe Moody, maybe Trace Jackson Davis. Are those guys going to be good enough to build around? But I'm with you with the when is the trade coming? And I'll add to that thought process by saying, very, very, very important to note, the Warriors, they're over the tax again. They are hard capped at the first apron, but they are well clear of that second apron, so they can aggregate guys together in a trade. Very different than a couple of the other teams that we've talked about: Suns, Celtics, Bucks. Those teams are wildly expensive. They can't do those things. They're well over. We spent a while talking yesterday about how hard it is for even the Lakers to make trades. But the Warriors are in a position with, like you said, all this expiring salary. You got Kevon Looney at $8 million expiring. You've got Gary Payton at $9 million. You've got DeAnthony Melton. Let's say it's just like, he's fine, but he's not exactly what we need. That's $12.8 million. You're already at $30 million in expiring salary that you can put together. And that's before we say, all right, you know what? Moody's not maybe really part of what we're doing. We'll throw in Moses Moody as a sweetener on top, as that's the real get of a player for a team there. So I think I don't think this team looks just like this in February. What is it? February 6th, I think, is the trade deadline.
Yeah.
I don't think that afternoon they look exactly the same. I don't know that it's a monster, huge blockbuster, but I'm with you. I think they looked at it and said, we have 3 years to try to get one more title, make one more finals run. Let's do what we need to do to go get it done. And that's part of why, as painful as it is to see Klay Thompson in a Mavericks uniform for some Warriors fans, and to see the Chris Paul salary slot, because let's face it, they weren't super attached to Chris Paul, the player, but to see those just gone. But that's what it created, was that flexibility to do something else later. And notice, I didn't even go to Andrew Wiggins. If you could throw Andrew Wiggins in a trade, well, now you've got a whole other world of opportunities opened up if you've got a team that's willing to take him on. I kind of kept that one out because I think that's a little less likely. But yeah, man, this is they're going to be they're going to be one of those teams. I think we're going to see heavy usage on our spot track trade machine when it really gets cranking here in a few months. I think we're going to see them in heavy rotation there because I think people are going to be trying to get them now 1 or 2 more guys to really make that run for Steph before it's all said and done.
It certainly wouldn't hurt if Andrew Wiggins has a hot start to the season.
Sure.
Because I think the general perception around Wiggins, there's negative value with the multiple years on the deal, but it also wasn't that long ago that he was helping the Warriors win a championship, and so many teams look for that 3-and-D wing archetype. And he's only 29. If he can flash something of a resurgence, I think that would go a long way towards making that contract a bit more palatable for teams, especially as we're now in an era where everybody is super wary right now of any kind of long-term money. So, but I do, yeah, if they're going to make a big move, you're probably talking Wiggins' contract is going to have to be involved. Otherwise, maybe some tinkering in the margins. I didn't mention, but I love the Kyle Anderson addition as well. I think he's going to be a nice get for them. All right, tomorrow we'll continue on with this, and we'll look at we'll pick another Western. Well, what do you want to? Which division do you want to do in the West tomorrow?
Let's go. Let's start west and work our way east. We'll go to the Northwest next.
Northwest.
We'll go to those guys.
That'll be fun. Okay, so we'll do that tomorrow. Make sure you do subscribe to the YouTube channel. Don't forget to turn on notifications as well. Till next time, everybody. See ya and stay safe.